Centuries before our history books, a world called Nibiru burned bright, then went silent. Survivors, a desperate journey to a blue planet called Earth. Why abandon a home built over millennia? What catastrophe pushed an entire civilization to flee? In this video, we trace their last days, the collapse that followed, and the secrets they took with them. Don't blink, the first clue comes in 30 seconds. Welcome to the journey inside one of history's most mysterious legends, the fall of Nibiru and the Anunnaki's desperate move toward Earth. In this documentary, we're not repeating internet myths. We're breaking down the smartest theories, what was happening on their world, why it became unlivable, and how those events may have shaped the stories we know today. Stay with me, because each chapter reveals a new piece of a puzzle that has fascinated researchers for decades. Chapter 1. The Dying World. Every ancient story has a point where everything starts to fall apart. And for Nibiru, that moment began deep under its own surface. Long before any legend speaks of an exodus, long before the first ship ever launched toward Earth, something inside the planet began to change. Nibiru wasn't born dying. In most interpretations, it was once a fully functioning world, stable seasons, a thick protective atmosphere, and advanced cities powered by energy systems far ahead of anything humans developed in early history. Its environment supported life, and its people, the Anunnaki, had centuries of progress behind them. But even the most advanced civilizations can't outrun nature forever. According to these ancient stories and modern theories, the first signs of danger were almost invisible. Scientists on Nibiru began detecting rare shifts in the planet's magnetic field, tiny fluctuations that didn't match any previous cycle. At first, it looked harmless, the kind of natural variation any planet might experience. But as decades passed, the fluctuations grew stronger. Storms became longer. Seasons stretched unpredictably. Nights grew colder. Days grew hotter. The planet's heartbeat was fading, and only the researchers could see it. Under the surface, pressure built inside Nibiru's core. Imagine tectonic plates slowly grinding out of rhythm, releasing energy in ways the world had never seen before. Land masses began shifting. Once stable regions turned volatile. Volcanoes that had been asleep for centuries suddenly came back to life with violent force. But the most dangerous change wasn't on the ground. It was in the sky. Nibiru's atmosphere, the shield that protected life, began thinning. Layer by layer, particle by particle, it started losing the ability to block harmful radiation. What once filtered sunlight into a warm golden glow now let in heat spikes, cosmic rays, and deadly storms. People felt the difference. Harvests shrank. Water reserves evaporated faster. Buildings built for a gentle climate now faced conditions they were never designed to survive. For the Anunnaki, this wasn't just a weather problem. It was a warning, a sign that the planet itself was destabilizing. Their scientific leaders issued reports predicting more intense atmospheric loss, stronger quakes, and massive energy shortages within the next orbital cycle. But not everyone believed them. Some said it was temporary. Others insisted Nibiru had survived worse in the past. Arguments grew. Fear grew faster. And in the middle of all this, a silent disaster was unfolding. Nibiru's core was cooling faster than expected. As the internal heat dropped, the magnetic field weakened. Without that invisible shield, solar winds began tearing into the atmosphere even harder. The process accelerated. What should have taken thousands of years was happening in only a few generations. That's when the Anunnaki realized this was an crisis they could fix with technology alone. They were facing a slow planetary collapse, one that no invention or structure could fully stop. Their home, the world their ancestors built over thousands of years, was starting to fail from the inside out. But the most chilling part? These signs were only the beginning. Because the real disaster, the one that forced them to choose between staying and vanishing forever, was still waiting in the next chapter. Chapter 2: The Atmosphere Crisis. By the time the ground beneath Nibiru began to tremble, another threat was silently spreading far above its cities, a threat far more dangerous than quakes or volcanoes. It was the slow unraveling of the planet's atmosphere, the very shield that made life possible. For generations, the Anunnaki lived under a sky that glowed in deep shades of gold and violet colors shaped by their planet's unique chemical balance. That balance kept temperatures stable, filtered harmful radiation, and locked in the warmth needed for civilization to flourish. But as Nibiru's magnetic field weakened, that perfect shield began to erode, almost molecule by molecule. At first, it was barely noticeable. Cooler nights, sharper winds, slightly harsher sunlight during the day. Farmers blamed shifting weather. Engineers blamed minor solar activity. But the scientists knew better. They watched as ultraviolet indexes spiked beyond safe levels. As the upper atmosphere thinned at a rate never recorded in their history. Inside massive atmospheric observatories, alarms began to trigger daily. Satellite readings showed expanding holes in the planet's protective layers. Each time Nibiru swung closer to its star during its extreme orbit, those holes widened, letting in storms of radiation. And when the planet swung far away, temperatures plummeted to near global freezing. The atmosphere could no longer hold heat the way it once did. The skies changed. Clouds formed in strange, broken patterns. Storm cells grew violent, ripping across regions that hadn't seen severe weather in millennia. Lightning storms became nearly constant in some regions, hammering ancient structures and destabilizing energy grids. The beautiful sky that once inspired art, culture, and science had now become a warning, a turbulent reminder that the world above was collapsing faster than the world below. With atmospheric thinning came another problem: oxygen levels. Slowly, the air began to lose its density. People living at higher altitudes reported difficulty breathing. Plants struggled to grow. Entire ecological zones shifted. Forests that once thrived in warm climates dried into brittle wastelands. Rivers shrank. Oceans warmed and then cooled unpredictably, disrupting marine life and food production. And as the atmosphere weakened further, cosmic radiation, the silent killer of worlds, punched through. This wasn't the kind of radiation that burned immediately. It was the kind that damaged crops, weakened immune systems, and caused long-term environmental decay. Ancient records interpreted by researchers describe a period they called the dim years, not because the sun dimmed, but because hope did. Cities responded by building massive protective domes, atmospheric stabilizers, and radiation shields around key regions. These were marvels of engineering. Towering structures powered by an energy system that had supported their civilization for ages. But even this advanced technology had limits. The stabilizers required tremendous power, and the planet's weakening core was already reducing their energy output. Some scientists suggested replenishing the atmosphere with certain rare elements, but these materials were nearly exhausted. Their mines ran deeper every year, reaching unstable layers that risked collapse. Extracting more wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. Leaders held emergency councils discussing possibilities that would have been unthinkable centuries earlier. Could the atmosphere be fully repaired? Could they restore the magnetic field? Could they build a new artificial shield? None of the solutions were guaranteed. All of them required massive resources, and with every passing cycle, the damage accelerated. Ordinary citizens felt the anxiety. Masks became common in dry regions. Radiation shelters opened in schools, markets, and public squares. Entire populations began migrating toward safer zones, the few places where the atmosphere remained stable for longer portions of the orbit. These migrations created overcrowding, conflict, and fear. For the first time in generations, survival was becoming a daily challenge. But the most terrifying part wasn't what they could see. It was what they couldn't see. As the atmosphere thinned, astronomers began noticing strange wave patterns in Nibiru's skies. Aurora-like lights that shouldn't exist. Sudden energy blasts. Flickers of the magnetic field collapsing in real time. These were signs of a planet entering its final stages of atmospheric decay. And with every new reading, the scientists reached the same unavoidable conclusion. Nibiru was losing its ability to support life permanently. Repairing the atmosphere would require decades, maybe centuries, but the destruction was happening now. And the Anunnaki had only one question left to answer. If their world could no longer protect them, where could they go? The search for that answer would lead them to a distant blue world, and that journey begins in the next chapter. Chapter 3: Resource Breakdown. As the atmosphere continued to unravel and the skies of Nibiru transformed into a chaotic mix of violent storms and radiation, another crisis emerged, one that cut directly into the backbone of Anunnaki civilization: the slow, devastating collapse of their natural resources. For centuries, the Anunnaki had enjoyed what seemed like an endless supply of energy. Their world was rich in minerals, rare elements, geothermal heat, and advanced materials that powered their technology. Their cities glowed at night with luminescent towers, floating transit systems, and energy grids that stretched across continents. Everything they built, from their machines to their medicine, depended on a delicate balance between nature and technology. But as Nibiru's core began to cool, the planet's internal activity shifted. Mines started producing less, or veins that once ran deep with valuable minerals now came up dry. The geothermal vents that powered entire districts weakened. What used to flow like liquid fire now sputtered out like dying embers. It started small, a mining facility reporting lower output, an energy plant shutting down for repairs, a city experiencing rolling blackouts. At first, people assumed it was temporary. But the trend continued, month after month, year after year. The once powerful empire of Nibiru began to realize the terrifying truth. Their world was running out of fuel. Engineers noticed the signs early. Machines that had never failed before started breaking under pressure. Refineries worked overtime but delivered half the product. Transport ships began rationing their power cells. Factories reduced their operating hours to preserve what little energy remained. Behind closed doors, scientists made calculations, and every chart, every graph, every simulation pointed toward the same outcome. Within a few orbital cycles, Nibiru would no longer be able to produce the resources needed to sustain its advanced society. But the deeper they investigated, the worse the situation looked. Nibiru's crust was becoming unstable. Mining teams reported quakes that shook tunnels and caverns. They described strange electrical surges, magnetic anomalies, and pockets of gas that had never appeared in earlier explorations. Some mines had to be abandoned entirely. Others collapsed, sealing off millions of tons of resources that could have saved the planet, now forever out of reach. Geologists discovered something even more alarming. The cooling core was causing the planet to contract in uneven ways. Pressure shifted unpredictably, crushing old tunnels and tearing apart underground reservoirs. What had once been a predictable and renewable energy system had transformed into a dangerous, failing shell. And as resource production fell, the impact rippled across the entire civilization. Energy grids dimmed. Factories shut down. Agriculture systems failed to produce enough food. Medical facilities began rationing treatments that required advanced elements. Entire regions were forced into conservation mode, using ancient, inefficient methods just to survive another season. And yet, the Anunnaki were not a species that gave up easily. They launched dozens of missions to locate new resource deposits. Explorers pushed deeper beneath the crust, diving into regions untouched for millennia. They used seismic drones, plasma cutters, and gravitational scanners, the most advanced tools their world had ever seen. But every expedition returned with the same message. There's nothing left. Some scientists proposed tapping energy from the planet's outer layers, creating artificial power stations, even rewriting parts of their atmosphere using chemical reconstruction. But each of these plans required exactly what they no longer had: massive amounts of fuel and minerals. Meanwhile, the political landscape of Nibiru became unstable. Leaders argued over how to allocate dwindling resources. Should they focus on repairing the atmosphere, rebuilding the magnetic field, feeding the population, powering the cities, or preparing for evacuation? Every choice came with consequences. Every decision created new divisions. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Astronomers and geophysicists found evidence that Nibiru's resource collapse was accelerating because of its extreme orbit. The planet's long, sweeping path around its star stretched and compressed its magnetic field. ripping away minerals, creating massive geological stress, and draining the world faster each cycle. This meant one thing. Nibiru wasn't just failing, it was dying on schedule. The Anunnaki finally realized that no amount of engineering, mining, or rebuilding would be enough. They were living on a world that was shutting down from the inside out. But while their own planet was fading, the universe offered a tiny spark of hope. In the darkness of space, far beyond their broken atmosphere, astronomers detected something. A distant world full of water, mineral-rich soil, stable temperatures, and a protective magnetic field strong enough to support life. A planet that could supply what Nibiru no longer had. A blue world, quietly orbiting its own star. And that discovery would ignite one of the biggest debates in Anunnaki history. The debate that shapes the entire next chapter. Because the question was no longer, how do we save Nibiru? 'Twas now, should we leave it behind? Chapter 4. The Search for a New World. By the time Nibiru's mines had fallen silent and its atmosphere had thinned into a fragile shell, one idea began echoing through the halls of the great councils, research academies, and ancient temples. If their world was dying, could another one save them? This question wasn't new. For centuries, Nibiru's astronomers had scanned the skies, mapping star systems and cataloging distant worlds. Their advanced telescopes could read atmospheric signatures light years away. Spacecraft had been launched to nearby moons and drifting asteroids. But until now, the thought of abandoning Nibiru was unthinkable, almost taboo. Nibiru wasn't just a planet. It was their origin, their identity, the cradle of their civilization. Leaving it behind would mean letting go of everything their ancestors built. Yet the signs were undeniable. Atmospheric decay, magnetic field collapse, energy shortages, geological instability, and now the depletion of essential life-sustaining resources. Staying meant extinction. This realization sparked one of the largest scientific mobilizations in their history. Across research towers, orbital stations, and vast underground laboratories, astronomers, physicists, geologists, and explorers formed a unified task force, known as the Celestial Survey Initiative, a mission that would decide the fate of their species. The search begins. High above Nibiru's storm-ravaged skies, powerful space observatories recalibrated their instruments toward distant star systems. Scientists analyzed spectra, looking for the unmistakable fingerprints of life-supporting worlds. Oxygen signatures, water vapor, stable temperatures, dense atmospheres. Their first round of scans revealed dozens of planets, some too hot, some frozen, others choked with poisonous gases. A few orbited unstable stars. Some had gravity that would crush an Anunnaki body. Many were so far away that reaching them would take thousands of years. But one world stood out. A small blue sphere orbiting a yellow star, covered in oceans, wrapped in breathable air, protected by a strong magnetic field. Its surface shimmered with the perfect chemical balance to sustain life. Its temperature range was stable. Its landmasses rich in minerals. Its atmosphere thick enough to support ecosystems. Every reading matched the conditions the Anunnaki needed. the scientists labeled it. Target World E3, the pale blue candidate. In simpler words, Earth, the debate that shook the planet. The discovery ignited a wave of debate unlike anything in Nibiru's history. The High Council gathered in the Great Chamber, a colosseum-like structure where leaders, scientists, historians, and cultural guardians met. For weeks, the chamber filled with arguments, calculations, warnings, and hopes. Some believed Earth was the answer, a second chance, a stable refuge. A world where the Anunnaki could rebuild their society and recover the resources Nibiru had lost. Others argued it was too risky. Traveling such a distance during an atmospheric and energy crisis could doom the population. What if Earth cannot sustain us? What if the journey drains our last remaining resources? What if we arrive too late? Voices clashed. Plans collapsed. New ones arose. Tension spread across Nibiru. Meanwhile, astronomers kept gathering more data. Earth wasn't just habitable, it was perfectly timed. Its atmosphere was fresh. Its magnetic fields strong. Its oceans deep. Its land rich with minerals Nibiru desperately needed. But there was another layer. Earth already had primitive life, complex ecosystems, early biological activity. That meant the planet was alive, thriving, and capable of long-term habitation. For the Anunnaki, that changed everything. Engineering the journey once the decision leaned toward exploration. Engineers began preparing one of the most ambitious space missions ever attempted. Massive spacecraft, some the size of cities, were designed using materials from the last functioning mines. Energy cores were rebuilt. Atmospheric stabilizers were integrated to ensure passengers survived the trip. Cryogenic systems were tested. Navigation AI was updated to handle long-range travel through uncharted space. But these colossal ships required staggering amounts of resources. Resources Nibiru barely had. Entire sectors were shut down to reroute energy. Factories converted their final reserves into ship components. Mining regions sacrificed their remaining output. Communities lived with blackouts for weeks so that Starship reactors could be charged. The population made sacrifices willingly. They weren't just building a spacecraft. They were building escape, survival, continuation. But even with all this effort, only a fraction of the population could make the journey. This sparked yet another wave of conflict. Who would go? Who would stay? Who would lead the expedition? Who would remain behind to maintain Nibiru as long as possible? The decisions were painful. Families were separated. Leaders were forced to choose logic over emotion. Scientists were prioritized. Engineers, explorers, medics, archivists, anyone whose skills were needed to build a new life. The rest would stay on Nibiru and fight to keep the planet stable for as long as they could. The distant blue world, as the final starship neared completion. Earth became the center of every discussion. Detailed simulations mapped its terrain. Energy readings showed mineral-rich landmasses. Projections revealed the possibility of establishing long-term settlements. The more they studied Earth, the more it looked like destiny, a world waiting to be discovered and understood. But the journey would not be easy. The path required navigating asteroid fields, gravitational distortions, solar radiation belts, and regions of dark space with no known markers. Still, the Anunnaki prepared. Their world was dying, but their hope was rising. And soon, the greatest migration in their history would begin a journey across the stars toward Allah, planet that would change everything. But in the next chapter, you'll see something even more dramatic. What happened when the Anunnaki actually launched their mission, and why their departure triggered events nobody expected. Chapter 5. The Exodus begins. Leaving a dying world behind picture. The final centuries of Nibiru, a once thriving world now trembling under its own instability. Storms tearing through ancient cities. Magnetic surges knocking out entire energy grids. Oceans shrinking. Forests collapsing into dust. The skies that once glowed with life now shimmered with a strange metallic haze, the visual reminder that their atmosphere was thinning and their time was running out. Inside the great halls of their ruling councils, the atmosphere was tense. These gatherings were no longer the confident ceremonial meetings of a proud species. They had become crisis sessions, emergency plans. Heated arguments, desperate timelines. Every voice carried the same fear disguised under logic. Their world was becoming unlivable. The Anunnaki scientists, the highest minds of their civilization, presented their final reports. The planet's orbit was shifting dangerously. Gravity fluctuations were destabilizing infrastructure. Radiation levels were rising faster than predicted. Even the underground biocities, once considered the safest places on Nibiru, were beginning to crack under the pressure. Entire regions were quietly being evacuated. Families leaving behind homes their ancestors built thousands of years earlier. Memories carved into stone. History etched into walls. Gone. And then came the moment every civilization hopes it never has to face. The announcement of planetary evacuation. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was the cold scientific truth spoken aloud for the first time. Save who you can. Move whoever is willing. Prepare for interplanetary travel. Nibiru was no longer the center of their existence. Survival was. Massive starships, dormant for centuries, were reactivated. Some were newly built in towering hangars that shook under their own weight. Workers labored around the clock. Pilots trained. Engineers recalibrated navigation systems built for long-range cosmic travel. Their exodus wasn't a single launch. It was waves upon waves of departures, each carrying a piece of Nibiru's culture, technology, and genetic legacy. But the most emotional part wasn't the technology. It was the people. Imagine standing on a launch platform, watching the horizon of your world fade behind clouds of red dust. Your planet, your history, slipping into decline. Knowing that you may never return. Knowing that even if you do, nothing will be the same. Not everyone agreed to leave. Some believed the planet could still be saved. Some refused to abandon their ancestral lands. Some simply couldn't find space on the departing vessels. The bitter truth: not all Anunnaki made it out. Every great migration has casualties, and theirs was no different. As the first fleet broke through Nibiru's atmosphere, the view from their spacecraft must have been heartbreaking. A magnificent world, still beautiful from afar, glowing with its deep red hue, yet dying from within. The Anunnaki watched their home shrink into the darkness of space, not knowing if it would collapse completely or survive as a ghost world. But for those leaving, one question overshadowed everything. Where will we rebuild? Where can life begin again? Their scientists already had an answer. A blue planet, rich in minerals, stable atmosphere, fresh water, abundant resources. A world untouched, unclaimed, vibrant with potential. Earth, and the moment they set their course toward that tiny, glowing world, history or myth was set in motion. But what did they find when they first approached Earth? And why did they believe this planet could do what Nibiru no longer could? That unfolds in the next chapter. Chapter 6. The Journey Toward Earth. Trials across the stars by the time the Anunnaki boarded their colossal starships. Nibiru was no longer a home. It was a memory fading into dust and storms. The skies that once inspired art and science now glowed with a harsh, metallic haze. A reminder that every moment left behind was a moment closer to extinction. Families stood on launch platforms, some tearful, some silent, all aware that they might never return. For the first time in millennia, a civilization faced the vast unknown together. The fleet didn't move as a single unit. It traveled in waves, staggered to reduce risk. Each ship carried a unique set of passengers, scientists, engineers, navigators, medics, and cultural historians. Each vessel also carried vital cargo, genetic archives, cultural records, energy reserves, and technology designed to survive in alien environments. Every item represented a piece of Nibiru's legacy, the essence of a civilization teetering on the brink. The vastness of space as they left Nibiru's orbit, the enormity of the journey became clear. Space was no gentle void. It was filled with hidden dangers. Asteroid fields drifted unpredictably. Gravitational anomalies threatened to tear ships apart. Radiation belts pulsated with energy, capable of damaging even the most advanced shields. And in the darkness between stars, there was no atmosphere, no warmth, no comfort, only silence and the hum of the engines keeping life alive. The Anunnaki had trained for this, but training could not prepare them for the isolation. Long months passed in stasis or slow cycles of activity. Many ships used time dilation and suspended animation to reduce life support strain, while others navigated in real time, relying on advanced AI and human oversight. Morale became a delicate balance, the psychological strain of leaving one's home world. Knowing that survival was not guaranteed weighed heavily on even the strongest minds. Cosmic challenges, despite their technology, challenges were constant. Micrometeoroids damaged outer hulls. Solar flares disrupted communications. Supply reserves had to be meticulously rationed. Engineers constantly repaired energy conduits, shield generators, and navigation systems. Every day was a battle against the cold, the radiation, and the vacuum of space. But perhaps the most subtle threat was uncertainty. The coordinates to the New World Earth had been plotted from light years away. Even a small miscalculation could send an entire vessel off course. Navigation teams spent hours cross-referencing star charts, adjusting trajectories, and constantly monitoring gravitational pulls from unseen celestial bodies. One wrong calculation, and the dream of survival could turn into a voyage into the infinite void. Hope and determination. Yet, amid the tension, hope endured. The discovery of Earth had given the Anunnaki purpose beyond survival. It wasn't just about escaping a dying planet. It was about preserving civilization, knowledge, and culture. Each child born aboard the ships, each experiment carried out in transit, each calculation completed was a testament to a species refusing to vanish. Stories and legends speak of the fleet passing through breathtaking cosmic phenomena, nebulae glowing in colors unseen on Nibiru, gas clouds reflecting starlight like living mirrors, asteroid belts that sparkled like jewels in the darkness. To the Anunnaki, these sights were both awe-inspiring and humbling. A reminder that the universe is vast, beautiful, and indifferent. Approaching the pale blue world, months turned into years. And then, finally, sensors detected the faint glow of a world orbiting a yellow star. The readings were astonishing. Stable temperatures, abundant water, a breathable atmosphere, and mineral-rich continents. Earth was not just habitable, it was a new beginning. Excitement surged among the fleet, but caution remained. They had traveled far. They had lost much. One misstep could ruin everything. As the ships approached, the crew meticulously analyzed gravity, tides, wind patterns, and energy fields. Every detail mattered. Every calculation could mean life or death. For the Anunnaki, this moment was transformative. They had left everything behind, their world, their cities, their history, and now faced a choice. To settle, to explore, to adapt, or risk the legacy of their civilization fading into legend. And so, as the fleet entered orbit around Earth, a new chapter began. One that would redefine their history and leave echoes for humanity to discover millennia later. But what challenges awaited them on this strange, vibrant planet? And how would the Anunnaki adapt to a world so different from their dying home? The answers unfold in the next chapter. Chapter 7. Arrival on Earth. First contact with a new world after years of travel across the void. The Anunnaki fleet finally reached its destination, the pale blue world, Earth. From orbit, the planet shimmered with vibrant blues, greens, and whites. Oceans stretched endlessly. Forests carpeted vast continents, and clouds drifted in intricate patterns, casting shadows on the land below. For many aboard the starships, it was the first time in generations they had seen life in full. Thriving abundance, a world untouched, pristine, and inviting. The first survey, sensors, and probes were immediately deployed to gather as much data as possible before landing. Atmospheric samples confirmed oxygen-rich air. Water quality and distribution were perfect for sustaining life. Geophysical scans revealed stable land masses and abundant minerals, everything their scientists had predicted. Even the magnetic field was strong, shielding the planet from cosmic radiation in a way Nibiru no longer could. The crew worked tirelessly. Every calculation mattered. Every sensor reading had to be precise. Landing sites were chosen based on stability, resource accessibility, and long-term survival potential. For the Anunnaki, this wasn't exploration for knowledge alone. It was survival. And the slightest miscalculation could doom an entire colony. The emotional toll. Yet amid the technical operations, emotions ran high. Many Anunnaki had never known another world. Some remembered Nibiru in all its glory, now lost forever. Families clung to one another as ships prepared to descend through Earth's atmosphere. Even the most stoic leaders struggled with the weight of leaving home, not just a planet, but a legacy. Stories tell of long, silent hours aboard the fleet, as individuals watched the planet grow larger through viewports. They witnessed oceans glimmering in sunlight, mountain ranges stretching across continents, and rivers winding through forests. For many, it was awe, hope, and grief all at once. They were leaving behind death and decay, but stepping into an entirely unknown future. The first landings. The first vessels descended slowly, carefully. Landing thrusters engaged, shaking the ground beneath. Dust and wind swirled as enormous ships settled on chosen plains. The Anunnaki stepped out onto the soil of Earth, feeling its firmness, smelling its richness, and tasting the crisp air. The world was alive, vibrant, safe. For the first time in centuries, they felt the exhilaration of possibility. Scientists immediately set up temporary habitats, research stations, and observation posts. They cataloged flora, fauna, and geological features. Every rock, plant, and water source was recorded. Even at this early stage, they began planning settlements and energy collection systems. Nibiru's technology was adapted to Earth's environment, bridging the gap between their dying world and this new home. Challenges on a new planet, yet Earth was not without its challenges. Although rich and stable, it was completely unfamiliar. Gravity, although compatible, required adjustments. Ecosystems were complex and unknown. Food had to be tested for compatibility with Anunnaki physiology. The climate, while generally stable, presented local variations that could be hazardous. And while humans had not yet emerged, life forms teemed across the land. Some potentially dangerous, even their most advanced sensors couldn't anticipate everything. Storms, soil composition differences, and wild animals demanded immediate attention. Engineers, biologists, and navigators had to work in perfect synchrony to ensure that the settlement would thrive. Every decision carried the weight of survival. The first signs of legacy. Despite these challenges, the Anunnaki began leaving subtle marks on their new world. Early records suggest that they planted knowledge, built structures, experimented with agriculture and resource management. Every action was a balance between survival and preserving culture. They were cautious, knowing that Earth was a long-term refuge, and also a world that could shape them as much as they shaped it. The psychological impact was profound. For many, Earth represented redemption, hope, and continuity. For others, it was bittersweet, a reminder that their home, Nibiru, was gone forever. But collectively, the Anunnaki had achieved what no civilization before them had attempted. They had survived the death of their world, crossed the void of space, arrived intact on a planet capable of sustaining life. a new beginning that would resonate for millennia. The unseen future, the next challenge, however, lay ahead. Earth was not just a safe haven. It was a dynamic, evolving planet. Life would grow, change, and interact in ways the Anunnaki could not yet fully predict. Their presence would leave ripples, subtle influences in the ecosystem, the climate, and eventually the history of emerging civilizations. And that is where the story takes its most intriguing turn. How the Anunnaki adapted to Earth, balanced survival with exploration, and laid the foundations for what would later be remembered as ancient myths and legends. In the next chapter, we will explore their settlements, adaptation strategies, and the long-term consequences of arriving on a world so different from their dying home. Chapter 8. Building a New Civilization. The first Anunnaki settlements on Earth. Landing on Earth was only the beginning. The real challenge, the true test of their intelligence, resilience, and unity, began the moment the Anunnaki stepped onto Earth's soil. A planet so alive, so unpredictable, so unlike the dusty remains of Nibiru, demanded a complete rethinking of how a civilization should survive. A world that breathed back Earth was overwhelming. The air felt heavier. The colors were brighter. Life was everywhere, swarming, buzzing, growing in every direction. On Nibiru, nature had faded with time. But here, every inch of Earth fought to exist. Winds roared differently. The oceans smelled deeply of salt and minerals. Forests whispered with movement. Even the ground vibrated with the quiet hum of insects and roots. For the Anunnaki, it wasn't just another planet. It was a sensory shock. Scientists quickly realized that adapting to Earth wasn't optional. It was urgent. Gravity pulled slightly differently, which affected their bones and muscle density. The sunlight wasn't the same spectrum as Nibiru's. Even the air composition required slow acclimation. Engineers rushed to create filtration domes and controlled habitats where new arrivals could adjust safely before moving openly across the land. The first colonies. Their first settlements were not permanent cities. They were transition outposts, circular, wide-based structures designed to blend with the environment while providing maximum safety. Inside these outposts, engineers built atmospheric stabilizers, hydration systems using Earth's abundant water, agricultural chambers for early experiments, energy towers to convert solar and geothermal power. Every tool was a lifeline. Every design choice mattered. This wasn't luxury. This was survival engineering at its peak. And still, Earth continued testing them. Unexpected threats within days of settlement. They encountered challenges no sensor scan had predicted. Massive storms would sweep across plains with terrifying speed. Dense forests hid creatures with unique survival instincts. Insects, microbes, and plants interacted with their biology in unpredictable ways. Even the oceans presented mysteries, tides rising and falling with mathematical precision, driven by the moon's gravity, something Nibiru had never known. To adapt, the Anunnaki had to study everything. Botanists cataloged thousands of species. Zoologists monitored animal behavior. Geologists recorded earthquakes, volcanic activity, and magnetic shifts. Earth was alive, but it played by its own rules. Exploring the unknown exploration, teams traveled farther from camp each day. They crossed vast deserts, dense jungles, mountain ranges, volcanic valleys, and lush riverlands. The deeper they went, the more they realized just how rare this planet was. Its ecosystem was not only balanced, it was self-correcting. Where one species flourished, another kept it in check. Where water moved, life followed. Where weather shifted, landscapes reshaped themselves in response. Several Anunnaki scholars wrote in their logs that Earth felt younger than Nibiru, a world still full of potential, still forming, still forgiving. To a dying civilization, this was hope. The birth of shared purpose, yet the psychological transition was equally profound. Some Anunnaki felt relief, the comfort of knowing their children would grow without fear of collapse. Others felt guilt, a sorrow that came from leaving their ancestral home behind. A few even questioned whether Earth was their destiny or just a temporary refuge. But slowly, unity formed. Shared survival. Shared responsibility. Shared purpose. They began crafting structures made from Earth's own resources, stone, clay, wood, and minerals, carefully combining them with their advanced technology. The earliest monuments weren't symbols of power, they were symbols of belonging, shaping the future. Over time, the Anunnaki learned to harness local energy sources, cultivate earth-grown crops, and build settlements that worked with nature instead of against it. Their society began transforming. Scholars educated newcomers on Earth's biology. Engineers redesigned tools to withstand Earth's weather. Explorers mapped coastlines and mountain ranges. Cultural leaders preserved Nibiru's memory through stories, art, and ritual. They were no longer just refugees. They were pioneers, rebuilding a civilization from the ashes of another. A foreshadowing of history, but with every success came new questions. How long would they remain hidden? What would happen if Earth's natural evolution intersected with theirs? And most importantly, could they remain the same people they were on Nibiru, or would Earth slowly reshape their identity forever? These questions would soon evolve into challenges far more complex than storms or survival. Because Earth was not just a home, it was a force that would eventually intertwine with the rise of early humans and shape ancient stories the world would later call myths. And that leads directly into the next chapter, how the Anunnaki settlement turned into influence, interaction, and the first traces of contact with emerging life on Earth. Chapter 9. The Great Adaptation. How the Anunnaki began transforming Earth as the seasons passed. The newcomers from Anunnaki realized something profound. Earth wasn't just a temporary refuge. It was becoming a part of them, shaping their technology, their culture, even their understanding of life itself. And in return, they were shaping Earth in ways the planet had never experienced before. The planet that challenged them, the memory of their collapsing homeworld, Nibiru, still lived within each survivor. It haunted their dreams, whispered through their rituals, and forced them to reflect on every decision. On Nibiru, their technology once maintained an ecosystem in decline. Here, Earth was the opposite, vibrant, self-regulating, unpredictable. The Anunnaki quickly noticed that they could not dominate Earth the way they dominated Nibiru. They had to learn from it. Gravity subtly reshaped their posture. Earth's sunlight recalibrated their internal cycles. Local microbes forced them to upgrade medical technology in ways they'd never imagined. Scientists realized that adaptation was no longer a plan. It was a biological partnership. Reinventing their technology through Earth, their machines, built for Nibiru's thin, unstable atmosphere, struggled under Earth's density. Energy collectors overloaded under stronger sunlight. Early drones malfunctioned in humid jungles. Even environmental stabilizers needed redesigning because Earth's ecosystems were too dynamic to be controlled. So the Anunnaki innovated. They created hybrid technology using Earth minerals and Nibiruan alloys. Structures incorporated local stone, wood, and clay, allowing them to breathe with the environment. Water systems harnessed river currents and geothermal heat instead of relying solely on reactors. Each new breakthrough created a ripple. Their scientific logs described Earth as a co-engineer. This wasn't colonization anymore. It was symbiosis. The spiritual transformation, but adaptation wasn't only physical or technological. It became spiritual. Earth's changing seasons, its rhythmic tides, its storms that cleared the skies, all began influencing Anunnaki culture. Priests and scholars noted that Earth operated through cycles of renewal, a stark contrast to Nibiru's gradual decay. New rituals formed, honoring rainfall, celebrating equinoxes, and observing the migrations of animals. For the first time since abandoning their dying world, the Anunnaki felt connected to something larger than themselves. They began interpreting Earth's rhythms as signs, not of dominance, but of wisdom. Elders taught that Nibiru represented the past, a teacher of hardship. Earth represented the future, a teacher of balance. Expanding across the continents once the first settlements stabilized. Exploration missions expanded their reach. One group moved toward fertile river valleys, another toward mineral-rich mountains. Others explored coasts where the ocean offered endless resources. Every terrain posed a new challenge, and every challenge taught them something new. They constructed outposts across different biomes, each uniquely designed to blend into its environment. Some used massive stone foundations shaped to withstand earthquakes. Others utilized natural caves reinforced with technology. On the coasts, floating platforms allowed them to observe tides and marine life safely. As they explored deeper, they found ecosystems evolving faster than they could track a planet teeming with possibility. Preserving memories of Nibiru despite their progress. Every settlement kept a memory hall, a sacred vault containing geological records from Nibiru holographic archives of cities that once flourished, cultural artifacts rescued during evacuation. Personal logs of those who didn't survive the journey. These halls were not built to mourn the past, but to ensure their identity survived alongside their adaptation. Generations later, these memory halls would become the source of myths, stories of a golden world the sky people once called home. The first signs of long-term influence. As time passed, the Anunnaki noticed something astonishing. Earth was responding to their presence. Small environmental shifts began appearing near their settlements, changes in vegetation patterns, soil enrichment, and even atmospheric microeffects caused by their technology. Nothing harmful, nothing destabilizing, but Earth had begun integrating them into its own evolutionary path. This realization sparked a debate among their leaders. Were they shaping Earth, or was Earth shaping them? The answer proved to be both. A world that would one day remember them, the Anunnaki did not know that far in the future. New forms of life would evolve on Earth, thinking beings who would inherit a world subtly influenced by the presence of their ancient visitors. But for now, the Anunnaki focused on survival, balance, and legacy. Their adaptation marked the dawn of an era that would echo across ages. Through stories, symbols, and mysteries humanity would someday uncover. And soon, these interactions with the planet would move towards something bigger, something unexpected. The emergence of early Earth species that would eventually rise to intelligence and cross paths with their ancient sky visitors. Chapter 10. The Final Return. The Anunnaki's last shadow over Earth for thousands of years. Ancient myths spoke of a final return, a moment when the Anunnaki would rise again. Not as rulers, not as creators, but as witnesses to what humanity had become. And while mainstream science treats these stories as symbolism, the deeper you look into the texts, the more unsettling the patterns become. Because hidden inside tablets from Sumer, tablets that survive fire, flood, empire, collapse, and time itself, there is a repeated message. What has been, will be again. But what does that mean? A warning? A prophecy? Or simply a reminder that civilizations rise and fall in predictable cycles? To understand this final chapter, we must follow the clues the ancient scribes left behind. Clues that paint a picture far more complex than God's returning from the sky. The signs they said to watch for across Mesopotamia. Priests and astronomers recorded signs believed to precede the Anunnaki's return. Not supernatural miracles, but cosmic disturbances. Shifting skies. Unusual planetary alignments. Sudden climate anomalies. Cycles of famine, then growth, then collapse. The ancients tracked these patterns obsessively, convinced that powerful forces, possibly even the same ones that destroyed Nibiru, could one day echo across Earth. Modern researchers note something interesting here. Many of these patterns align with known natural cycles, solar activity, volcanic seasons, and orbital changes. Yet the ancients insisted these weren't random. They believed they were warnings. The possibility they never left a rare interpretation of Sumerian mythology suggests something bold. The Anunnaki didn't leave, not all of them. According to certain translations, a remnant stayed behind when Nibiru's fate became uncertain. Scholars call them the Watchers. These beings were said to guide humanity quietly, influencing rulers, teaching knowledge, and shaping early civilizations without revealing themselves. Some legends even describe them as beings who walk among men but are not men. Modern conspiracy narratives exaggerate this idea, turning it into wild theories about shapeshifters. But the original concept is simpler and far more interesting. A small group of exiled survivors, blending in, preserving what they could of their lost world. If that interpretation holds any truth, then the return isn't about descending from the sky. It may be about the descendants of those survivors stepping back into the open. The memory of a dying world to the Anunnaki, the loss of Nibiru, wasn't just a catastrophe. It was a trauma so deep that it shaped every decision they made afterward. Imagine watching your oceans dry, your atmosphere collapse, your mountains crumble. Imagine knowing that your world, the world of your ancestors, your culture, your history, was dying, and that nothing could stop it. That kind of memory doesn't fade. It becomes a part of identity, a wound carried through generations. Some researchers argue that the reason ancient stories emphasize the Anunnaki's strict laws and hierarchical systems is because they were shaped by that trauma. They believed order was the only thing preventing the collapse they had once lived through. If their descendants return or reveal themselves, it may not be as conquerors, but as refugees whose story has been misunderstood for millennia. The final question: return or reminder? In the end, the core mystery remains the same as it was 6,000 years ago. Are the stories about the Anunnaki's return meant to be taken literally? Or are they symbolic warnings about the rise and fall of civilizations? Maybe the real message hidden in Sumerian tablets is this: great powers fall when they ignore the signs. Great worlds die when their people forget their place in the cosmos. And great civilizations collapse when they refuse to learn from the past. Perhaps the idea of the Anunnaki returning is not about beings descending from the sky. Perhaps it is about history repeating itself, about humanity standing at the edge of lodge, and the same mistakes that once destroyed another world. Because if the Anunnaki taught anything, it was this: nothing lasts forever. Not worlds, not empires, not civilizations. And sometimes the greatest warning does not come from the heavens, but from the ruins of those who came before. If you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of Nibiru, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment what topic you want next. Your support helps this channel keep exploring the unknown. See you in the next video.